Mount & Blade 2 Bannerlord is described by many people as a game that scratches an itch that no other game can scratch. Build up and manage massive armies, find interesting companions, have a spouse and children, fight as a mercenary and load up on gold, become a noble and join a kingdom, fight massive battles with hundreds or even thousands of soldiers, defend towns against gruesome sieges, or enlist the help of other nobles to help you siege and take over another kingdom. The best part of everything is you actually fight inside these battles alongside your soldiers, setting the game apart from others. You can go first person with a crossbow and make a 360 MLG trick shot, or go third person and swing a big ol' axe around and slaughter any poor peasant that comes your way. Ride on horseback with a spear and charge with a group of knights. Play a board game with a guy named Peric. There's a lot of fun to be had, skulls to split, and a whole map to conquer. Advance! At the same time, the game can also be described as bare bones and unfinished. Zero diplomacy, boring late game, robotic NPCs, repetitive and unengaging quests, idiotic AI, and a weird skill tree. The game feels half-baked and needs another hour or two in the oven. There's a lot of mixed opinions about Bannerlord, and so today, I would like to explore every nook and cranny, what makes it great and what are its flaws. Is it too ambitious? What can be done to fix it? Grab a bucket of grain and a nice warm glass of butter, and let's dive into the meat grinder. I would like to make something crystal clear from the get-go. I love Bannerlord. I have well over 700 hours. I'm never truly done with this game. I may go on long hiatuses, but I always come back. Any criticism comes from a place of passion. I want the game to be successful, but I also want it to be further improved so that we can continue to have fun. I'm not a video game developer. I don't know how difficult a game like Bannerlord is to make. I can sit here and make all sorts of suggestions, but at the end of the day, Tale Worlds are the ones who have to decide what's worth putting into their game. The main purpose of this video isn't to compare Bannerlord to Warband either. I agree that some elements should have been carried over. I want to focus more on the current state of the game, which, as of making this video, has been fully released for almost 2 years now, and is on version 1.2.9. It's also worth mentioning that we can pretty much expect no further major updates. The last update that added anything worth talking about was a long-ass time ago, and there's no timetable for future updates, there's no roadmap detailing what's going to be in any updates. Content creator Artem has a good video discussing what potentially will be in a 1.3 update, and I will link that video down below. Before we get into the nitty-gritty, I would like to talk a little bit about modding. I'm somewhat biased when it comes to it because I don't normally mod a game until I feel like I've fully experienced what vanilla has to offer. I hate it when you have to download a mod to fix a bug or to add a missing feature. That's supposed to be the developer's job. Modders do this out of passion, and companies like Tale Worlds, I believe, take advantage of that, expecting modders to complete their game for them for free. From what I understand, which is admittedly very little, the modding tools aren't even that great in the first place. Complete overhaul mods are infinitely delayed because any small update breaks them, and the bigger the mod, the more difficult it is to fix. People are tired of it. Tale Worlds is only adding bug fixes. There's no content being added. So some people feel that maybe they should just stop updating the game and just let modders take it over. The big issue with this, though, is not everyone has access to mods. So when a solution to missing content or a bug is just download this mod, bro, it's not really a good thing because console players will probably never have modding. So what? They're just screwed? Mods should enhance games, not fix them. Alright, okay. So with all of that out of the way, let's finally start up a game. Should we pick sandbox or campaign? If you're a newer player, or if you've always just stuck to one game mode and don't know the difference, I will explain. In campaign, you start with 2 brothers and a sister.
I love you, brother.
And there's a main quest line. In sandbox, you can choose your age in increments of 10, and if you choose an older age, you get more perk points in the beginning. That is pretty much the difference. You might think having a main quest line is a huge, gigantic difference. Playing out a story has got to be exciting and immersive with interesting characters and twists and turns and a climax. Yeah, no. The main quest is bad. Like, really bad. So bad that a lot of people choose sandbox just to avoid it. The way I see it, both modes are sandbox modes. There's just not much to differentiate the two. You could argue that the campaign mode is more noob-friendly because of the siblings that you get from the start. You can also just completely ignore the main quest line without any consequences. So why not just play the campaign? The tutorial, for the most part, it's okay. They teach the basics of combat, and horse riding training is pretty fun. When you leave the combat training zone, they teach you the basics of villages, recruiting soldiers, and buying food. The first thing the tutorial wants you to do when you arrive at a village is to enter the village and find the headman. This is wrong. I understand Tale Worlds made these amazing scenes with villages, castles, and towns, but the sad reality is that there is literally no point in going inside of any of these places. Teaching players to do this is wrong because it is a colossal waste of time. What makes it worse is that after you back out and buy the things you need, it makes you talk to the headman again, and instead of letting you know you can just talk to him from the menu by clicking talk, it forces you to visit him at the village again. It never tells you that you can just talk to a notable without entering the scene. When you skip the tutorial, you're skipping a large amount of background and story. For example, during the tutorial, you meet Tactios, the traveling doctor who tells you about the first piece of the dragon banner and how Radagos has it. If you skip the tutorial, all you get is a text box explaining that you met a doctor who gives you the piece immediately. During tutorial, you fight Radagos at a hideout, and your brother takes him into custody so that they can find your siblings. Skipping tutorial, you have no clue who Radagos is, and he pops up in a town after you complete the first quest and is like, hey, we found your siblings. In all of my years playing this game, I'd never done a tutorial until making this video, because I like to learn as I go, and I assumed that it was purely for combat, so I always skipped it not knowing how much story I was missing. After finishing or skipping the tutorial, you get two quests. One is to investigate Neretzes' folly, which we'll come back to, and the other is to establish your clan. After hiring 20 men, earning 2,000 dinars, and raising your clan renown to level 1, you're ready to rescue all of your super overpowered siblings. After you beat the hideout, Radagos executes the leader. There will be an option for you to either let Radagos go or to kill him, and if you kill him, your siblings will die, and if you let him go, nothing happens, you never see him again. This is a huge missed opportunity with not being able to recruit Radagos. Yes, he is the one that's responsible for your parents' death and your siblings' capture, but if you wanted to forgive him and set him on a path to redemption, he would be the most fleshed out companion in the entire game. I would always recruit him because he's instantly more interesting than any of the boring robotic companions you find in taverns.
Peace to you.
Before I move on to the rest of the campaign, I want to say that even though there are some flaws with the beginning, they really do have some solid bones here for an interesting story. Compared to the rest, the beginning outshines in every way. It's interesting. It has some characters and some background. It does an okay job of teaching you the ropes, and it's not a boring slog like the rest of the main quest line.
Well, then who do we have here?
Alright, now that we've rescued our siblings, let's take a look at the other quest we got about investigating Neretzes' folly. Oh wow, we have to talk to 10 different nobles? That sounds kind of annoying, but that shouldn't be too bad, right? Right? Please come back, I just want to talk to you about our Lord and Savior Neretzes' folly. This is the worst quest in the entire game. It's not even really a quest. It's the developer's way of forcing lore onto the player in the most brain-dead way possible. This is where you can see they completely gave up on making an actual campaign, because from here on out, it's basically just sandbox. Have you ever read a book or watched a movie that you really liked in the beginning, and then all of a sudden, halfway through it, the author becomes verbose? They just throw information at you without any substance? Maybe it's necessary to the lore or world building, but they do it in a boring, wall of text kind of way. That's the Neretzes' Folly quest times 100. You're just finding nobles with a yellow exclamation point instead of a blue one. and asking them about the great battle of Pendraic. They tell their perspective, and that's about it. You move on to the next noble with a yellow exclamation point. There's no sense of urgency or danger or of importance with Neretzes' folly, and that is a huge issue because this is supposed to be the middle of the campaign. And it's not that the lore that these nobles have to say isn't interesting, it's that it's poorly implemented. Instead of it being a quest, I wish we could just ask these nobles about the battle if we come across them. It would make it feel more natural instead of forced. Also, there are 18 nobles that you can talk to, but your quest is to only talk to 10, and then the other 8 dialogues are locked out, which is just so stupid. I've seen some people argue that maybe Tell Worlds wants the player to take their time with the Neretzes' Folly quest to get used to the world and talk to the 10 nobles whenever they want. You're supposed to get bits and pieces of story over time and build yourself up in between. But is that really what comes to mind when you're thinking about a story mission? I'm not saying story mode should strictly be linear, but usually when a game has a story mode and a sandbox mode, you expect the story mode to be more linear, something that has a little bit different rules and a major plotline going on, and you expect the sandbox to be more freeform and unlimited, making up your own goals. I said earlier that sandbox and campaign had very few differences between them, and Neretzes' Folly is a big example as to why I said that. You don't even have to do the quest if you don't want to. You can ignore, and there are no consequences other than not getting the Dragon Banner, and that thing is a piece of doggy doo-doo anyway. It's been years since you've been given the Neretzes' Follies quest, and you finally slogged your way to the final noble to hear their perspective about the great battle of Pendraic. It is time to move on to the next big part of your long journey, talking to another 2 NPCs. Remember the first piece of the Dragon Banner that Tactios the Wandering Doctor gave us? Well, it's time to get the other 2 pieces. We're on our way to meet Istiana and Arzagos. These 2 NPCs are the last 2 unique characters of the main campaign. They both have a big goal that they want you to achieve by remaking the legendary Dragon Banner. It's said that whoever owns the banner will reunite all of Calradia, and Istiana wants you to use that power to restore the Empire, while Arzagos wants you to eradicate it. They both know where a piece of the banner is, but they won't tell you where their piece is unless you swear to them that you'll side with them.
Before I reveal that information to you, I need to know more about your intentions.
Too bad for them, I always cross my fingers behind my back. You have to lie to one of them. If you want to side with the Empire, then you have to lie to Arzagos to find out where his piece is, and if you want to side against the Empire, then you lie to Istiana to find her piece. It's confusing, it's poorly written, it's a horrible quest design, which is sad because it's a pretty big moment in the main quest, but you're just clicking a button twice to get the game to progress. What makes things worse is that these 2 pieces are just in hideouts outside of the towns where Arzagos and Istiana reside. Seriously? They couldn't come up with anything more exciting than that? I've taken out dozens and dozens of hideouts at this point in the campaign. You would think that they would make something a little special up. This is the fabled Dragon Banner. Throw some spice on it. Okay, so we've went to the hideouts and we assembled the banner. Let's take a look at its divine glory. All of the buildup, all of the lore, the importance of this item, and it sucks. The first thing that comes to mind when I see the Dragon Banner is its lackluster selling price. When Tactios gives you the first piece of the banner, he tells you that just one of the pieces was very valuable. So with the whole thing being reassembled, you would think that it would be worth a fortune and not 2 measly dinars. I understand you're not supposed to sell it, you're supposed to use it, but why not? Instead of giving it away to a king, why not sell it to them? It would progress the game in the same way, and the player could earn some dough from the highest bidder. Or, you could just not tell the player that the main item is worth so much if you don't want them to expect to sell it. Putting the monetary value aside, the stats of the Dragon Banner are just downright pathetic. I mean, really? 10% increased damage to mounted troops? I get the 30% version just from winning tournaments. It doesn't have to be overpowered, but it should be unique in some way. When this banner is equipped, you have a 15% increase when trying to convince other nobles to join your faction, or something like that would go a long way in making me actually want to use the damn thing. The whole story is centered around the dragon banner, so you would think it would have some sort of stat that the player would be intrigued in using. So what does it do if it's worth nothing and its stats are mid? Remember how the point of it was to reunite all of Calredia? Well, it does exactly that, except all of Calredia unites against you instead of with you. Whether you choose to support an existing kingdom or create your own, this is where you make your choice of supporting or destroying the Empire. Even if you want to use the banner on yourself for your own kingdom, you still have to agree to back Arzagos or Istiana. Whoever you choose, the opposite will become your enemy and start a conspiracy to ally other kingdoms to fight against you. Wait a second. You're telling me that these two people can convince powerful kings to unite, but they can't gather enough manpower to take down a stinking hideout? Okay then. A timer will start with 1,000 out of 2,000, and once the timer runs out, 3 kingdoms will unite to fight whatever faction you chose. You can lower the timer by completing conspiracy quests, which are so annoying, by the way. They're a little bit better than fighting bandits, but not by much. The locations always spawn super far away from you. If you're in the middle of a war with Vlandia, the last thing that you want to do is travel all the way to Kazatland to raid a stupid hideout. The whole point of this quest is supposed to be about ending the game. This is the final push because once the timer runs out and the 3 Kingdom Alliance gangs up on you, there's no stopping them. If you're well prepared, then this can be a good thing, as 3 kingdoms being permanently at war with you can give you a chance to quickly take them over. If you're not prepared, then you're pretty much screwed because you can't sue for peace for any of these kingdoms. They won't stop attacking you until you get the endgame screen by capturing 2/3 of the map. Making your own kingdom is already challenging as it is, and claiming the dragon banner for yourself can be a speedy way to lose hours of work. It wouldn't be so bad if some nobles decided to join your faction. I mean, you do hold the legendary dragon banner. Shouldn't some nobles immediately kneel to you? None of this matters anyways because, like I said earlier, you can completely ignore the main quest. You don't need the dragon banner for anything. You can make your own kingdom or join an existing one and conquer the whole map or do whatever else it is that your little warrior heart desires. There are no incentives to participate in the main quest line, and there are no consequences to ignoring it. Actually, you know what? I'm lying. There is a huge point to the campaign. The dragon banner is extremely valuable and important because it's a literal nuke. If you want to know the true way to use it, you need to join a kingdom that you despise, give the nuclear device to the leader, wait until a conspiracy timer runs out, and then dip. Watch the kingdom crumble. In conclusion, for the campaign mode, there are little bits and pieces of story here and there, but the Dragon Banner quest is mostly tediously running around trying to find kings and nobles, and then tediously running around to try to stop conspiracies, when you've got more important shit to do. We just waded through the crock of shit that is the campaign, but there is a reason why this game is popular, right? Why would I have hundreds of hours on it otherwise? What makes people flock to Bannerlord? The combat. Now, when I say combat, I don't mean this. The individual combat is a little bit stiff, and the AI seems to always block my every swing, but you can sometimes parry and feint and even chamber if you practice enough. Although it's easier to turn around and wait for them to stop blocking and then turn back around and hit them. The individual fighting isn't the greatest, but it's good enough for what it is. So why did I say the combat was the reason for why this game is so good? Because I'm talking about the atmosphere of combat. The battles, the wars, the tactics. When you play a game like Civilization or Age of Empires, it's entertaining to watch your little silly soldiers fight to the death. But with Bannerlord, you're a part of these fights. You don't just command your army around, you fight with them side by side. There's just something addicting to hiring peasants and leveling them up to tier 5 troops. All of the cultures have different troop trees and a special noble troop tree, and it's so much fun to try different combinations. Either going for a well-balanced army with tanky frontliners, a line of archers, and a healthy amount of cavalry. Maybe you just want to do another Crusade horse archer playthrough. Join the call to action from a commander and fight massive battles with thousands of soldiers. Well, if the commander has half a brain anyways. Seriously, the map AI in this game is fucking awful. 1 second you're on your way to defend a castle, the other second you're visiting the commander's grandmother at the local village. I can't tell you how many times I've screamed at my screen as our giant 1,000-man army is strolling past a siege happening to one of our major towns. Still though, when you do get to fight those huge battles, it's really awesome. Winning by the skin of your teeth with only a few soldiers still alive is so satisfying. Attacking and defending towns is also fun and something that's been vastly improved over the years. One of my favorite things to do in the game is to sit atop a castle wall and try to take down as many of the horde as possible. Then when an enemy gets close enough, I start chucking boulders at them. I wish the AI knew how to handle sieges better. They tend to build a ram and maybe a tower, and then will charge into battle only to get all of their men killed because the walls have catapults. Tactics are also done well. They let you set your troops in different formations, and you can place them accordingly before the fight begins, letting you strategize for the really hard fights. You can tell one of your formations to target a specific enemy formation, allowing you to focus on getting rid of bigger threats. Utilize the environment. If there's a hill or mountain, use the advantage of high ground for your ranged troops. If there's a forest, scatter and use it for cover. You can hand over control to the AI and let them organize troops for you, allowing you to take more of a warrior role if you want. You can take a backseat approach and ride around on your horse, min-maxing what your troops do. You can use the most effective strategy, F1, F3. The most lackluster part of tactics is moral. Moral is supposed to be a mechanic that determines whether or not your soldiers decide to abandon your party. You can increase it by having a variety of food, winning lots of battles, and some perks impact morale. But the only time I've ever seen morale have an effect during a battle is when I'm fighting bandits. I rarely see regular troops on either side running away, unless it's at the very end of the battle and there's like 3 guys left. But even then, there's sometimes a pesky bastard on a horse that just won't give up and will run circles around your men until somebody finally hits him. It should have a large impact on battles. You should lose morale if someone with a banner dies, if nobles in your army or you the player falls. If one side loses too much, then the soldiers either try running away or drop their weapons and surrender. Morals should be impactful even before the fight as well. If I roll up on an enemy noble that has 24 peasants while I have 200 Imperial Legionnaires, they should be shaking in their boots and surrender immediately. But instead, they have balls of steel and fight you anyways. While strategy is pretty good in this game, you don't get a chance to utilize it very often, especially in the late game. Once you have a large amount of high-tier soldiers, you pretty much steamroll everyone. The difficulty just isn't there in the endgame, it's more of a grind than anything, making people want to start over to get the feeling of struggle back. The way Tale Worlds tries to solve this is for the AI to cheat. If you take out a very large army and then move over to siege a castle, the game will teleport another army near your location to fight you all over again. These armies will usually consist mostly of peasants, making it more annoying than enjoyable. The AI is tied to the economy, like the player is, and I think that's a wonderful idea, because if you're at war and losing constantly, then it makes sense that your kingdom's troop situation isn't going to be the greatest. But the thing is, AI is way worse at the game than the player, so they need some buffs. Not cheats, but buffs. taking away the teleport bullshit with armies of peasants, and instead give the nobles a massive experience boost for their troops. That way, when a noble is released or escapes from captivity, instead of spawning with 80 peasants, they can spawn with like 30 mid-tier troops and spend their time trying to build back up again to what they had before. It's understandable that not every noble is going to have a massive group of expensive soldiers. Clans with less money won't be able to afford tons of fighting power, and that's okay. But it needs to be better than it is because, as it stands, the endgame is a slog of slaughtering peasants over and over again. I mean, hey, if that's your thing, then maybe you don't have any complaints. When you get to the late game, there needs to be something to make you feel that struggle again. An event that impacts the game in a way that shakes the foundations of Calradia. Like a country from overseas taking interest in raiding the coast. New warriors with new tactics and weapons and armor. What are some ideas that you think would spice up the endgame? Leave a comment down below. Overall, the combat is the best part of the game and needs the least work done compared to the other parts of the game. Some improvements would be much appreciated, but there are more pressing issues that should be addressed first. I want to take a break from the campaign, from the single player content. I heard this game has multiplayer, and I want to try it out. It says 0 seconds waiting time. This should be quick, yes. Well, okay, no problem. We'll come back and check on multiplayer later. While we're waiting to find a match, we'll go over the RPG elements. After all, Tale Worlds describes Bannerlord as a strategy, action, role-playing game. The quality of the campaign mode should give you a hint on how good the role-playing is. Very shallow, it hardly exists. And no, using your imagination does not make it a good RPG. If you love Bannerlord like I do, then you've probably started a playthrough with a bunch of ideas in your head, like giving your character a backstory, being a scum criminal who pillages and hunts down every caravan you see, or a mercenary who has a dream to one day found a kingdom. Imagination is all well and good, but the game doesn't have the mechanics to support anything you imagine. Bannerlord has a lot of RPG elements, like a perk system, a questing system, lots of different types of NPCs, beautifully detailed locations, character creation and background selection, a smithing system, criminal system. Everyone ages and has families. When you look at everything I just listed, you might think, wow, this game sounds like a great RPG. What's your problem, bro? The problem is that these things lack depth. They're bare-boned, unfinished, and uninspired. Now, I don't want to say too much about character creation because it's the least of any concerns, but I will say, man, it's ugly. I can't make a character not look weird. Though, it is pretty funny that making your character as small as possible makes it harder to get hit. The background selection right after you create your ugly-ass character is okay. You're basically just giving your character flavor text, which is good, but it starts and ends right there. Your humble beginnings don't impact the game outside of deciding what your starting perks and weapons are going to be. No one cares if you came from a peasant family or if your parents were renowned warriors. In fact, no one will care about anything at all because the NPCs in this game have no personality whatsoever. These are soulless, mindless bags of dirt that have 3 facial expressions: neutral, slightly angry, and way too happy. There's never a real conversation to be had with literally anyone. I understand that there are a ton of NPCs, so not every single one of them are going to have a special dialogue, but by golly, give them at least some lines that aren't related to the quest. Damn! There are a few noble NPCs that have a dialogue option to ask them about their thoughts on politics, but even that is bland. It's mostly just them gloating about their bloodline, and it's not like you have any options to agree with or insult them. And what's the point of giving the player 3 options for greetings? As far as I can tell, no matter what option you choose, it doesn't change anything. It is a lazy attempt to make the player feel like they're having a conversation. If I had the option to call Dirthhurt a big wussy milk drinker, he would just stare at me like... The companions aren't much better. And these are supposed to be the NPCs with the most amount of backstory. They're supposed to be our special buddies who we bond with over committing war crimes. Instead, they're all randomly generated. The only thing special about them is their stupid little sap story they tell before you recruit them. After hearing about 4 or 5 of them, you've heard them all. So you just end up clicking the just skip your bullshit button. If you think getting married and having kids will appease your crippling loneliness, think again, because your family would watch you get torn apart by a pack of wolves and not blink an eye. Once you marry someone, the only change in dialogue will be that they now call you husband or wife, and that's about it. You can switch to somebody in your family if your main character dies or if you want to retire for some reason. This can be useful if you're playing the hardest difficulty and have hero deaths on. The whole aging system is pretty cool. It allows for endless gameplay. Unfortunately, since the endgame isn't as exciting or as challenging as it needs to be, it's a mechanic that isn't utilized very well. There are some cutscenes scattered about and very limited voice acting. Both are fine things to have, but it's something that should have been added when the game was more finished. We could have done without the subpar voice acting of the NPCs saying their greeting line.
I don't think I know you.
There are a ton of other things they could have done to make the game better, like actually giving the NPCs a personality. Adding more voice acting for battles would have been better. Imagine if they added events instead. It's not like we want an exact copy of the feast from Warband, but we don't have any sort of event. What if, when a king calls for a vote, he calls everyone to the capital and we argue about it? It would be a great addition to the speech check mechanic as you try to convince other nobles to vote against or for any law that's being presented. What if there was a prestigious tournament hosted by a very rich noble, and if you win, there's an after party where you earn extra renown or influence by mingling with people, and the noble gives you a special prize? What if you actually attended your wedding instead of watching a 30-second cutscene? Why can't we spit in the face of a noble we don't like and duel them? What if towns and villages randomly had celebrations with merchant stalls and special items to buy? Or market conventions where lots of merchants attend to sell goods? Maybe even set up your own stall. The point is that there's only bloodshed in Calradia. Other than hacking peasants to pieces, there's not much to do. There's no life. The NPCs might be the most lackluster part of Bannerlord's supposed role-playing, but trailing right behind, being almost as bad, are the quests. The pool of available quests isn't that great, with only about 36 different ones to do. With a game this size, and with the crucial need to complete quests to gain gold, influence, and renown, there needs to be at least double the amount to alleviate the mindless repetition. How many poachers are there in Calradia? I've taken out thousands of them at this point, and they just keep coming. How many one-handed axes is it going to take to finally sate these gang leaders? Most quests are only worth doing early game because you have nothing and you need to work your way up. But once you start to hit the mid-game, that 1300 gold from the caravan ambush starts looking worse and worse. Obviously, it's not all about the money. After all, you do earn sweet skill XP. Escorting caravans is convenient to grind up your trade skill as you go from town to town buying and selling. With bandit bases, I like to unleash my companions and let them do all the work because it helps level them up. But then you have quests that feel like a complete waste of time. Family feud or landowner needs access to the commons makes you lose relations with another notable, and the reward isn't even that good. In and Out is interesting because it showcases the board games that each culture has, but they're not that fun. And the time investment isn't worth the measly 1,000 gold that you get. Not to mention, you can lose money if the AI beats you at the board game. And it will beat you. Betting fraud seems like a great quest at first glance. You team up with a gang leader to scam multiple tournaments where they tell you to lose at a specified round. You get paid every time you do what they say, and then a big payout at the last tournament, earning you maybe 3,500 gold. This is one of the worst quests, because not only is it time consuming, you also don't get much more than just betting on yourself. And some of the prizes you can get from tournaments are worth an insane amount. If you see a noble horse up for grabs, those things can sell anywhere from 10 grand to 20 grand. The weapons and armor prizes, Even the lower tiered stuff can get you a decent chunk of change, or you can use it to outfit your companions for free. Nobles have a set of quests to give, but they're not much better. Lord needs horses. Lord needs garrison troops. Lord needs supplies. Lord needs to shut the hell up and get it themselves. Why can't I give quests out? I should be able to make a noble of lesser standing go fetch me some grain for once. The capture a lord quest is impossible unless you get lucky and find them wandering about all by themselves. The Spy Among Us is boring, and never, ever take the Company of Trouble quest unless you're a masochist. When you become a queen, you lose access to some quest, which is just ridiculous. This is a poor attempt at immersion, as why do I lose access to a couple of quests because I'm too important, but I can still deliver herds of cattle? It should be the other way around, where when I become king, the game should open up more stuff for me to do. Make some quest region locked. Like a Botanian village might ask you to deliver wood to an Azerite village, giving you more gold than the average delivery quest. A Sturgeon town might ask you to hunt down an infamous Viking who's been terrorizing the coast. A Khuzate noble just lost a whole herd of their finest horses to a sneaky group of bandits. Find them, bring them back, and they'll reward you with a couple of their finest war horses. Do you know what would make people care a lot more about the companions? Give them personal quests related to the sap stories they tell. There's a smith companion whose backstory is that he pounded a noble's face in because the noble killed a baby. What if that noble's family tracked your companion down and captured him while you guys were in a town and you have to go save him? There needs to be more quests that are geared towards the late game. Something that wakes you up and puts the fear of God into you. Like a group of bandits grew big and strong, have lots of high-tier troops, and manage to take over a town. Remember how pissed off Lord Urgion is at you for not voting for him to get that castle? Well, he's made it his lifelong mission to make you suffer as he sends groups of mercenaries to hunt you down. This is an area of the game that desperately needs more variety. Give us more stuff to do outside of the meat grinder. Of course, some quests are going to be similar and repetitive. This is an issue with a lot of open world games, but changing each one up even a little bit can go a long way. You could argue that you're not supposed to do quests late game. You're just supposed to fight and go to war. But where's the balance there? Early game, you do a lot of quests and fighting. So when the late game comes around and there's no quest worth doing, you're losing a large amount of content. Perks, on the other hand, have way too much variety. With 375 options to choose from, they heavily favored quantity over quality. While we need more variety with quests to help stave off repetition, perks need to be more impactful. So many of them are pitiful and don't feel rewarding at all. And why are so many out of place? I don't want to see that I got a skill point towards one-handed weapons only to get a 5% boost to troop XP. I want a one-hand related skill. I mean, hello? Am I not in the right tree? It's not fun to grind athletics all the way to the end just to get a shitty perk that gives a 5% damage bonus to throwing weapons. There's a throwing category. Why isn't this like the first perk that you get over there? The smithing tree is by far my favorite because every single perk is relevant to smithing. Both paths have opposite benefits that make sense. Even the secondary perks like Experienced Smith and Steelmaker 3 are relevant to smithing. This is a straightforward, no bullshit tree with great options. Have you noticed the governor perks yet? Yeah. Some of them look pretty decent, don't they? Look at Standard Bearer. 20% less wages to garrisoned infantry? That alone is worth picking. Too bad it literally does nothing for you. Basically, when you own a fief, which is a castle or town, by the way, there's a spot to put a governor. And depending on what skills they have, they can be a real boon for you. The problem is that these perks seem to be mostly randomly placed, making it annoyingly difficult to get the ones that you might want because governors are companions, and leveling up companions is very slow, and their stats are random. A good skill tree for a governor to have is engineering, because it has lots of perks that boost fief projects and defenses. I happen to have a companion with over 100 engineering, but damn. Too bad, he only has 1 point in polearm, and I needed that standard bearer perk because the castle he would be staying at is where I keep all of my legionnaires. If you have the patience, then you could give him a spear and put any skill points he gets from now on into polearm, but that's gonna take a while. Also, he only has 3 intellect, so his engineering skill isn't going to get much higher. He's level 13, so he's not going to get an attribute point for another 3 levels. All of his other skill points are scattered all over the damn place, meaning he's not going to be a very effective governor unless I spend years and years training him. I'm not sure how they could make the governor system perfect, but I think it would be a great idea to make a different type of NPC to fill that role. These NPCs would have access to a governor's skill tree, and they could level up over time when they are assigned to a fief. While we're at it, let's tinker with the randomness of the fools we find in the taverns. It's not completely random. The names of the companions are a sign of what kind of skills they might have. Someone with Spice Vendor in their name is going to have a higher trade skill, and someone named Blood Axe will have high two-handed. But as we just saw with our engineer, they tend to have randomly selected skill points. It would be better if companions were more specialized. So if you're looking for a healer, they should have 2 or 3 skill points in medicine and at least 4 intellect. Their other skills can be random, but don't make it to where they have 1 skill point in like 10 different categories. I'd rather find a doctor who has horse riding level to 200 than a doctor who can't decide if he wants to be a rogue or a steward. Another solution would be to have some blank slate companions who are under level 5. Technically, this is kind of what your children are for, but they take 18 whole years before you can use them. The reason companions are so important and why their perks mean so much is because as the player, you need to rely on them. When you are selecting your background for your character, you need to carefully choose what you're going to be focusing on, and if you're newer to the game, this can be a noob trap. The player doesn't need to put any points into scouting, steward, medicine, or engineering because you can assign companions that have these skills and reap the same benefits. You can kind of do the same with smithing and trade as well, because if you don't plan on doing much trading, then a spice vendor can make a lot of money for you instead. Or, for smithing, you can just find a couple of coal biters to craft weapons for you. Another reason why it's so important to utilize companions is because there is a learning limit. The green shows you how high you can get a skill until it stops earning XP. If you have 0 skill points in bow and only 2 control, then your bow skill will quickly turn red, meaning you will not be able to level it up anymore. This is the part of the perk system that I hate the most, as it makes getting the final perks extremely tedious and slow to get. You need lots of attribute points to be able to max out a skill, and you only get 1 attribute point every 4 levels, which takes a long ass time. And to just kick the player in the nuts, there's also a learning rate. If you put all 5 focus points into trade, and your social attribute is 7, you'll get trade over 100 pretty quickly. But the more you level it up, the more XP it takes, and you earn XP at a slower rate. This is why it's so hard to max out skills, taking entire lifetimes just to do so. The bare minimum to help fix the perk system is to take away the learning limit and keep the learning rate. Let the player earn XP for all skills, and if they put points into a skill, they learn it faster. If, for some reason, you ever want to feel sad, take a stroll through a town, a castle, or a village, and look around at all of the wasted potential. The scenes in this game are impressive, if a little wonky here and there, but they're great and immersive. It's just too bad because there's nothing to do in them outside of a very few select quests and sieges. You can take over alleyways in towns, but other than leveling up your roguery, there's no real incentive, because the money you gain is insignificant, and you lose relation with a notable, which is always bad. Everything that you need to do with these places can be done through menus, and it's 1000% quicker. I remember back when they added the talk button for NPCs, I was so happy because I didn't have to load the scene anymore. I'm not sure if Tale Worlds had some big grand plans that they were going to implement, but I think adding mini-games inside of these places would breathe some much needed air into the game. It adds a role-playing experience and gives a sense to all the areas that were created. Instead of smithing from the menu, you need to go into town and play the minigame. And how good you do affects how much XP you receive and how good the weapon comes out. If you want to recharge your stamina, you rent a bed to sleep in that costs money for every night that you're there. Put that trade skill to use and barter with merchants using speech checks based on how high your charm and trade are. There could still be the normal merchant menu when you visit somewhere, but if you want to try to get a better price, you have to go in person. You want to sell a legendary two-handed sword that you made for a better price? Walk up to the smith, convince him to give you 10% more than what it was originally valued at. Did your soldiers eat up all of your butter and you want to stock up for the road? Go to the butter dealer and haggle for some great prices. You know how you can buy workshops? What if you could do some manual labor and get more production out of them? There are so many things they could add. Scenes are a blank canvas that are begging to be filled. I can see the argument against minigames that it takes too much time and you would rather just have a few clicks and be done. That's a valid opinion. But this is supposed to be an RPG, and they clearly agree with all the work they've put into these scenes. I wonder if we found a match for multiplayer yet. Still searching, huh? Okay, well, maybe it just needs a little more time. We'll come back to it. For now, let's talk about everyone's favorite topic, politics. At least in Bannerlord's case, the lack thereof. Between choosing policies, the economy, voting, fief management, rebellions, and diplomacy, you would think that there's a robust political atmosphere. If we look at the Steam description again, they say, engage in diplomacy. And that is an even bigger lie than calling it a role-playing game. Just like with the perks, there are a lot of policies to choose from. A whopping 31 choices. But also like with the perks, most of them are hardly worth looking at. Some are downright bad, like the Canton's policy, and some are negligible to the point of ignoring entirely, like Council of the Commons. For some policies, there's no point in not picking because there's no downside, like castle charters. The most important policies are the ones that give you loyalty because if you capture a town that doesn't belong to your kingdom's culture, that town's loyalty gets a huge debuff, and if you don't fix this issue, they will rebel and defect from your kingdom. One of the ways to help offset this is to have a governor of that town of the same culture, but if your kingdom doesn't have any policies that give loyalty, or even worse, that lose loyalty, then that town is going to be lost sooner or later. This isn't a huge problem for seasoned Bannerlord veterans, but for newer players, and especially for AI kingdoms, it is an issue. For newer players, it can be overwhelming to sift through 31 policies. You're probably going to have to do research because you have no clue what town security is or the importance of settlement loyalty. And for AI kingdoms, oh boy, if you've ever seen tons of rebel towns across the map, it's because the AI doesn't know shit about loyalty. One of the best policies to get is Forgiveness of Debts because it gives you a whopping 2 loyalty at the measly cost of 5% less settlement production. The AI rarely votes for it though, I guess because they see the 5% and are scared of it or something, I don't know. AI seems to vote for either the most random or the worst policies. So, if you want to run your own kingdom, make sure you get all of the best policies in place before you go and recruit any clans. Or if you're a part of an existing kingdom and you want to change some of the policies, but the other nobles keep voting you out, you can force the AI to waste their influence by spamming votes, and eventually you will get your way. Speaking of rebellions, it's not that bad of a feature. Towns will rebel when its loyalty gets low enough, which is usually a result of it being captured by another kingdom, but it can happen in other ways too, like the town starving, or bad relations with the notables and low security. I think its current state is mostly okay other than lacking some depth. It poses a challenge to conquest. You can't just steamroll the map, you also need to pay attention to the people's needs. Otherwise, they'll turn against you. If you're at war with a strong kingdom and one of their towns rebel, it can give you some much needed relief as they turn their attention on getting it back. Even better, you can go and take it for yourself. A very common strategy that a lot of players use is to take a town that's rebelled and start their kingdom that way. Overall, I think it's kind of cool for prices to always be changing like in real life. Areas lose and gain prosperity, making it easier or harder to buy and sell. If a town is connected to a village that produces iron, they're more likely to sell better equipment. Or if they're connected to a grain village, a beer workshop will be more profitable. Managing your fiefs can play a big part in the economy because if you don't pay attention and one of your towns is starving, their prosperity is going to plummet, which means less taxes for your fat pockets. There are plenty of projects you can tell your towns and castles to build that increase food production, security, prosperity, and even a better prison to stop those pesky, slippery nobles from escaping. They've built what feels like a real breathing economy, a world that feels alive. The main issue with the economy is the role-playing aspect of it. The best way to play the game by far is to be a warrior smith who sells tons of battle loot from whatever war you're fighting from, crafting javelins and two-handed swords. Doing a merchant playthrough is extremely tedious, a huge grind. I'm not saying it should be overpowered, but if you want to make millions, it will take time. And you will probably use smithing and the spoils of war to speed the process up anyways. Every single time I've told myself, this is it. This is going to be my full merchant playthrough, where instead of fighting for it all, I buy it. I give up halfway through, because being a merchant sucks. Let's talk about the elephant in the room. Diplomacy. One of the biggest issues that Bannerlord has. You can go to war with other kingdoms, and you can sue for peace. That's about it. You're the king of Valandia, and you have a great relationship with the king of Britannia? Oh well, he just declared war on you randomly. Want to team up with the Western Empire to fight against the Sturgeons? Too bad, because alliances don't exist. If the economy of Calradia feels alive, it's the complete opposite for the nobility aspect of the game. It's not underwhelming, it's dead. Having to balance relationships with other realms is desperately needed in this game. If two kingdoms go to war, trade routes are immediately stopped between them, and when the two factions make peace, the trading starts back up again. What if there is negotiating between wars as well? If you don't want to trade with the Khazate during peacetime because you don't need their resources and they need yours, it could damage your economy, ultimately help you with the next war against them. Maybe they open up trade with another kingdom because they need resources. Borders don't really exist. It would be cool if there was a diplomatic option to tell another faction that your borders are closed. If a noble crosses a border that they're not supposed to, it can start a war if they're caught. This would make for interesting situations for the player and the AI. You as the player would have to determine if it's worth crossing a border to get where you need to go. This would encourage the AI and the player to focus on their neighboring realms, either make a hearty alliance with them and try to keep relations high, or focus all military efforts on them to get them out of the way. Politics feels like an afterthought, like it was tacked on and then forgotten about. You could argue that the game is a battle simulator, you're supposed to focus on the fighting anyways, but that doesn't make sense. They've built the bones for a grand strategy game, not a battle simulator. Why would they build these beautiful scenes everywhere that you can interact with outside of combat? Why have relations with people? Why have spouses and kids and an aging system in place? Why can we trade jewelry and control alleyways? Saying this game was meant to be a battle simulator feels like copium for a game that should have so much more than it does. That's it. I'm done searching for a match. This is ridiculous. Does the zero actually mean infinite? To be fair, there are some private servers that you can join that get up to 100 or even 500 players sometimes. But I'm not the type of person who likes to go out of their way to play multiplayer like that. I don't want to join a Discord server and interact with a bunch of people. I just want to press find match and find a match within a reasonable amount of time. Some multiplayer mods out there completely change the experience and have dedicated player bases keeping multiplayer somewhat alive. But when it comes to vanilla open matchmaking, no one ever plays it. I've had this game for years and have tried periodically to find a match and have never once been able to play one. And since I've never been able to play, how am I supposed to judge it? They should have never taken the time or resources to make multiplayer, and instead finished the main game and implemented co-op. We need more games like Bannerlord, and with how successful it's been, I hope some talented developers one day make the Bannerlord we all know can happen. Tale Worlds was way too ambitious and didn't follow through on giving any depth to any of those ambitions. I sometimes ask myself if I love the game so much because it's a good game, or if it fulfills a very specific niche that I desire to play. I would give Mountain Blade Bannerlord 5.5 pounds of butter out of 10.